Shabbat Shalom, and this is 10 Minutes of Torah. Not 8 days of Chanukah. We are in the middle of 8 days of Chanukah, which is wonderful, and not the year 2025, which begins next week, but 10 Minutes of Torah. Well, this week's parasha is Miketz, as we begin to get to the most crucial point in the stories about Joseph and his brothers and going down into Egypt, and so that's where the parasha, where the Torah portion picks up, is Joseph being in Egypt, and if you may recall, he was in the dungeon, and he had dreams that he interpreted from the butler and the baker, and the butler, who had been put back to his previous position, was going to remember Joseph, only he forgot. For 2 years he forgot. And then Pharaoh has a dream, and it's a dream about 7 cows coming out of the Nile, and they're very healthy and well fed, and then 7 more cows come out, and they're gaunt, and they're hungry, and they consume the 7 healthy ones. And then Pharaoh has a second very similar dream, this time not involving animals, but rather grain. 7 stalks of grain also appear, and the healthy ones get consumed by the ones that are dry and not yielding much. Well, no one can interpret these prayers. And all of a sudden, Pharaoh's butler remembers Joseph. And so Pharaoh sends for Joseph, for someone to interpret these dreams. Now, they don't seem to be that difficult, actually, but in the meantime, Joseph has interpreted them and saying that what's going to happen is 7 years of great abundance, Pharaoh, and then it'll be followed by 7 years of famine, and all of the abundance that were in the first 7 years, if you don't plan well, will be consumed by the famine of the 7 years. So, having interpreted the dreams in that way, Pharaoh is so pleased with Joseph that he appoints him, Joseph, this former prisoner, to oversee the land and collect grain during the years of plenty in order to get Egypt through the years of famine. And he becomes second in command to Pharaoh. But in the meantime, back in the land of Israel, Joseph's own family, his brothers and father, have been hit hard by the famine. And Jacob hears there is food in Egypt. So he sends all of his sons except Benjamin, which is Joseph's only full brother. He sends them all down to Egypt to get some food. And when they arrive, Joseph recognizes his brothers, but since Joseph now looks quite different, like an Egyptian nobleman, they do not recognize him. When Joseph discovers that Benjamin is not with them, he sends the brothers back to Jacob to bring Benjamin to Egypt. Finally, Jacob agrees to allow Benjamin to go back to Egypt to get more food, and the parasha concludes with Joseph planting a silver divining cup. That means a cup which was used to also foretell the future, a silver divining cup in Benjamin's bag in order to arrest him as the brothers are about to return to Jacob. It really leaves us on a cliff. Next week I'll tell you what happens. But the story of Joseph always coincides with Chanukah. There it is, a nice Chanukiah. My father-in-law has a beautiful collection of Chanukiot. This one, as you can see, is of the walls of Jerusalem. Tonight, Thursday night, is the second night, so I put 2 candles in. Of course, on Shabbat, it'll be the third night, and you have instructions as to how to light. Actually, let's put these. One just fell. We'll put these so you can see them a bit. There we go. Chanukah. Now, Chanukah actually is very much intertwined with the story of Joseph. But first, Let's think about the nature of Hanukkah. You know, there are 3 holidays in Judaism that last over a period of time. And those are Pesach, Sukkot, and Hanukkah. Most holidays are one day. But in this case, these 3 holidays each enables us to think about the values that are inherent in the holiday and that cause us to celebrate the holiday in the first place. So what kind of values are there in Hanukkah that are important, and how do they tie in with Joseph? So Joseph is in a dungeon. It's dark. He is in a situation where it looks like he may never escape. His brothers had thrown him into a dark pit before they sold him into slavery. So Joseph is coming from darkness into light. Joseph comes up out of that terrible situation in the dungeon after having been sold by his brothers into slavery, and he finds light. So that the idea of going from darkness to light is already a part of our historical experience. Now, tonight, Thursday night, marking the 3rd night of Hanukkah, it reminds us of significant values that we find in celebrating Hanukkah, of going from darkness to light. Let's consider fire for a moment. Fire has a unique property. What is it? Nothing else has this property that I'm aware of. You can see fire. You can feel it. Here's my candles, although unlit, right? You can feel the heat of the flames. And but you can feel it, you can see it, and it has no material substance to it. You can look at a flame and you can see through it. If you have a dark room, all you need is one candle to give light. And once you have one candle lit, right, here's my shamash. Once you have one candle lit, you can light how many candles from that one light? The answer is an infinite number. Because when you light a candle from another source of light, you don't take anything away from that candle. That is a fascinating value that we have. An infinite number of candles can be lit from one light, and you don't decrease when you take from it. So it seems to me that both Joseph, in his coming out of the darkness of the dungeon into the light of the day, and ultimately saving not only the Jewish people, by the way, but also the Egyptian people by enabling them to have food during those 7 lean years. Candles, the unique symbolism of candles, reminds us of how each and every human soul, neshama, are lit from 2 sources: God's light and the light of our fellow human beings. And we receive that without ever being diminished. So Hanukkah teaches us, I think, a great lesson. Throughout Jewish history, throughout our own personal histories too, there are always moments of seeming darkness. Every human being goes through this. And as a people, how many times have we gone through it? We are still living through it. Here I have something that reminds me daily of the hostages that are still being held in Gaza for the 2nd Hanukkah. And yet, it teaches us that no matter how dark it might seem, and imagine for those hostages how dark it is, because many of them are kept in tunnels underground. No matter how dark it is, Hanukkah teaches us that ultimately we will find light. We'll find light from God. That's the teachings of the Torah. and will find light from other human beings, from the acts of kindness, from the good things that they do. And in that way, we actually combine, as we light the Hanukkah candles, the symbolism of both Miketz, of Joseph coming from darkness to light, and the people of Israel, of coming from darkness to light on Hanukkah, and each of our own lives. And may that light continue to shine forth for us throughout Hanukkah and throughout the year. Well, this has been 10 Minutes of Torah, not 8 nights of Hanukkah, shedding some light on that, not January 1st, 2025, our new year, another number, but 10 Minutes of Torah. Shabbat Shalom.